now is always a good time to think about going solar. If you haven't yet, we're seeing a lot of interest in solar from homeowners, not just in New York, really all across the country. And since the Inflation Reduction Act in 2022, we've seen that interest continue to grow.
It only takes about 2 minutes of scrolling our Facebook comments to realize the debate over climate change and the clean energy transition is one that is still being debated by a not insignificant portion of our population. But there are a few topics that don't garner as many negative comments. I saw it a few weeks ago with our episode on home energy audits, something that we all should be taking advantage of, and another that doesn't fire people up as much is residential rooftop solar. So that is our topic for today. This is Plugging In. I'm Barry Wygel. Welcome to Plugging In, powering our way to a brighter and healthier New York. I'm your host, Barry Wygel. Each episode on this podcast, we will discuss a different topic related to clean energy, explaining complex topics in a way you can understand. Become part of the community as we help to make a brighter and healthier New York.
As the sun crests on the horizon, a new day dawns in our state. A new hope for tomorrow is rising, a clean future we create. Tomorrow we breathe easier, tomorrow the skies are clear. Today we are plugging in, the future of New York is here.
Joining us on the podcast today is Noah Ginsburg. He is the executive director of the New York Solar Industries Association. He has worked to advocate for solar development since 2009, so he is the perfect guest for this topic. Noah, welcome to the podcast.
Happy to be here, Barry.
So do you guys keep track, or is there a sense of how many New Yorkers or New York homes have installed rooftop solar?
We do, yeah. The state of New York maintains public databases, so you can see this. And there are about 250,000 New Yorkers who have installed solar either on their home or their business, and even more who have signed up for local community solar projects.
And I know growing up 20 years ago, 15 years ago, you might see like one house in one every 5 neighborhoods that have it. I assume it's being much more rapidly adopted in the last few years.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, solar is becoming more and more commonplace. It's still a minority of homes that have installed solar yet, but frankly, we think that that's going to change over time. We're seeing a lot of interest in solar from homeowners, not just in New York, really all across the country. And since the Inflation Reduction Act in 2022, we've seen that interest continue to grow.
The goal of having rooftop solar, apart from, helping in the fight against climate change and doing your part and reducing the load on the grid. But the goal is really to get your electricity bill down to zero or very low. And with a properly sized system, that's possible, right?
Absolutely. I would say maybe the exception to that is if you have kind of a home in New York City where you might have small rooftops and, maybe 4 stories. But in general, if you're installing solar on a suburban home, you can get to 70 to 100% offset. Back in the day, we used to tell people who are installing solar to undersize their system a little bit because the assumption at that time was that, well, you're going to do energy efficiency upgrades to your home, your appliances are going to get more efficient. So you don't want to go 100% because then you'll have too much solar. Well, it's a different world today. And now with everyone getting electric vehicles and thinking about shifting from combusting fossil fuels to heat their home to air source heat pumps, it's actually the other way where you really want to maximize solar because you're not just powering your home, you're also fueling your car. So, it's an exciting time for solar. We are definitely seeing system sizes increase a little bit because of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I got solar in my house about 10 months ago, and my only regret so far is not throwing up a couple more panels because a couple months later, I got my electric vehicle. And so I was at that 100%. Now we've dropped a little bit, but so far, the last 10 months have been great. For someone who's interested in getting their electric bill down to nothing, what is the first step in the process?
Installing solar it's a big decision. So you want to make sure that you're picking the right contractor, that you're picking the right financing option. My recommendation to folks when they say I'm interested in solar, I say go talk to installers, go get some quotes, and that you'll get proposals, you'll get details. There'll be a salesperson that will walk you through it. What I always recommend to friends and family who ask me, say, hey, I'm thinking about solar for my home. I always tell them the same thing, which is get multiple bids. Ideally, get at least one from a local installer and one from a national provider, just for that comparison. Review those proposals in detail. ask lots of questions. There are folks from the solar companies who are going to be there to answer questions that you have, whether it be about the equipment, the financing terms, the warranties. You really want to make sure you know what you're getting into. These are 25-year plus systems. So you want to feel really good about the decision. The other thing I say to folks is take your time. It's a big decision. You want to make sure you feel good, but don't take too much time because a lot of the incentives that are available today might not be tomorrow. And we know that's certainly true with the state rebate program through NYSERDA.
And then once you get those 3 quotes, which was the best advice I got when I went through it, was go get 3 quotes and pick from there. But how do you choose among those 3? How is it just a bottom line number, or how do you kind of evaluate what makes a good quote?
Sure. Well, I think that for choosing most things, the hope is that it's not just based on the price. I think in some cases, if that's your approach, you get what you pay for. So I think it is really important to look at online reviews through Yelp, Angie's List, those kinds of websites to understand that other folks are happy with the installer, that they're reputable. You want to make sure that you're working with a NYSERDA participating contractor, which is another kind of quality check you can do in New York State. And, when you look at the quote, you want to understand what equipment am I getting? How much is the system going to produce? Again, not every installer is going to design exactly the same system for your home. So maybe one installer is going to get you to 70% offset, and another one's going to get you to 90% offset for your electric consumption. Well, you should ask questions about that and say, hey, I got another quote that said they can get to 90%. Is there a way that you could do that? And maybe they'll come back with higher efficiency panels, or maybe they'll take a look and see if they can put some panels on your garage as well. So I think my big recommendation is don't just take the option and just pick between the 3. Really just get some quotes, engage in conversation with the sales rep, and you're going to learn a lot about the company and get a sense of your level of comfort with that company through that process, right? If you get what looks like a great quote, but the salesperson is rushing you and they don't have good answers to basic questions, well, that's a red flag. You want to work with someone who you really trust.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And so how do you know what size system to get for your house?
So a solar company will ask for your last 12 months of electric consumption, and then they'll do an analysis to look at how much will solar panels produce in this area, based on if you have more trees and more shade, then maybe you'd need more solar panels to produce the same amount because they're a little bit less efficient. If it's facing south, you get more electricity than if it's facing east or west. So these are the types of things that the solar companies are really expert at analyzing, and then they'll come back to you with an estimate saying, look, here's an estimate, here's a design. Maybe they're taking into account other things like your aesthetic preferences for where you want the solar panels, all that. And then they'll say, here's what we can do in terms of offsetting your bill.
So let's kind of work through a hypothetical project. So we have got our bids, we picked our contractor, we asked all the right questions. Let's talk a little bit about the pricing. You mentioned there's different ways to approach the project. What are some of those ways?
A big question that everyone needs to make, and this is actually true for not just for solar, but also for things like an auto purchase, it's lease or own. So this is something that I think is a really important consideration that ties into the incentives and to what extent you can actually take advantage of them. So the incentives that are available, we have great incentives in New York State for folks that install solar. You get a federal tax credit of 30%. There's a state tax credit for up to 25%, although it's capped at $5,000, and that cap hasn't increased in 18 years, and that's something we want to change. And then there's also, in some parts of the state, there's a NYSERDA incentive that's available as well, like a rebate. And down in New York City, we've got a property tax abatement. So these incentives are really meaningful. The 2 that I want to focus on, though, are the income tax credits. So there's a federal income tax credit and there's a state income tax credit. These are great if you are in that part of your career where you're working, you're earning a good living, and you're paying quite a bit in taxes. Well, that tax credit's really valuable to you. But if you're of modest means, if you're low income, currently unemployed, if you're retired, then maybe a tax credit's not going to do you much good because you don't have a big tax bill to offset. So if you're in that situation where you don't have a tax bill to offset and you can't take those incentives, then a lease might actually work out better for you because a solar company will finance the upfront cost. They can take the tax credit and then pass through those savings to you in the form of a lower lease payment. Just as an aside on a policy topic, NYSEA has been advocating for several years for making New York State's residential solar tax credit, raising that per household cap, which hasn't increased in 18 years, but also importantly, making that credit refundable to low-income folks and seniors. If we think about making sure that clean energy is accessible, not just to folks who are affluent, but really to all New Yorkers, especially folks who are of modest means and who really need those savings.
The biggest selling point when the contractor sat down with me was the break-even time and the warranty on the panels, and seeing the difference in that. And I think our break-even time came out to about 8 years, I think it was. And then the warranty on the panel, I think, was 25 years. So it is an investment. It was a lot of money up front that we paid, but we'll have that break-even time, and then it's really free power with no bill, and we have paid off our investment. So it was exciting to see that, and I'm looking forward to getting to that mark where the panels are paying for themselves and offsetting 100% of our energy, hopefully. Well, we'll see if we get a second electric vehicle, how that works.
That's awesome, Barry. And again, the payback period for solar in New York State, it ranges actually by region. Down in New York City and on Long Island, the payback periods are short, 5 years, in some cases even shorter than 5 years, because the electric rates are so high. And then as you get further north and further west in our state, where electric rates are a little bit lower, homes tend to consume a lot more electricity as you get further north and west. So it's not that bills are that much lower, but your payback period might be a little bit longer, maybe 8 to 10 years, like you're saying.
But a contractor will help you through all that math so that you don't have to worry about it, which is very nice. So interest rates are still pretty high. So if you're looking to do a project and you're looking to finance it, if you don't have the capital to upfront, which is a sizable investment, is it worth waiting, do you think, to see if the interest rates go down over the next year or two?
I mean, I think interest rates might go down over the next year or two, but in the meantime, you'll be paying really high electric rates, and incentives might go down over the next year or two with the NYSERDA rebate. I think that in some cases, maybe it could make sense to wait and see if you can get a lower interest rate. But realistically, what I would say is that now is always a good time to think about going solar if you haven't yet. You see what kind of estimates you get in terms of pricing and interest rates. There are a couple of things I want to say about this, though. So if you look at the interest rates that are available and you think, gosh, that's high, there has to be a lower cost way to do that. Well, there are a couple of things that you could consider. One is a lease option, where, again, a third party will finance the project and the solar company will own and operate the solar panels on your rooftop. They take the federal tax credit and you get those guaranteed electric bill savings or the lower monthly rate. And, I would look at those on just kind of an apples to apples basis and say, do I get more benefit from owning it and financing it with a loan? Or should I do a lease? Another thing I want to plug is NYSERDA offers a program called Through Green Jobs, Green New York, where particularly folks who are in lower income census tracts can access really low interest rates. So definitely would encourage everyone to look at those programs. And again, ask the solar contractor you're working with, because they have a lot of experience navigating all the different financing options that are out there, and they'll be able to help you out.
Yeah, that was another thing that I wasn't really sure about getting into it was I'm Googling, all the different incentives and whatnot, making sure you don't miss any. But then again, I picked a good contractor who walked me through all of that and made it very easy. So I think the moral of the story is reach out and start getting those quotes and see if it makes sense for you. And there was no obligation. And so if it doesn't make sense for you, it doesn't, but it certainly doesn't hurt to get that information.
Absolutely.
I'll finish on one last topic of community solar, because there are obviously people in New York State that rooftop doesn't make sense because they don't have a roof that'll work for it. So can you just do a quick 30-second, we'll probably do a whole separate podcast on this, but what is community solar and how people could get more information on it?
Well, I'll start by saying community solar is amazing. Community solar addresses one of the core issues in New York State, which is that, as you've mentioned, many of us live in multifamily buildings. Many of us are renters. Many of us maybe have an old roof, a shaded roof, and can't put solar on our own rooftop. But with community solar, you can still sign up for a local solar project and get guaranteed electric bill savings. The way that community solar works is that a project is developed, on open land. In some cases, it can be rooftop, and then basically hundreds of people can subscribe to that project and get a share of the output of the system. This is really important from just an access perspective. So many people can't access rooftop solar, but they can participate in local community solar. I'm proud to say that New York has the biggest community solar market in the entire United States. So this is an area where New York is absolutely a leader. And it's something that, even if you look at solar for your home and turns out it's not for you, or, the contractor says your roof is shaded, or you're going to replace your roof in 3 years and you don't want to put solar panels on an old roof, sign up for a local community solar project. Again, there's really no downside. It's guaranteed bill savings, and you're supporting a local clean energy project.
Right. And you're not financing that project. You don't have to pay in the capital costs.
It's a subscription model where you pay for savings. So for every dollar that the solar project knocks off your electric bill, you got to pay 90 cents, but it all happens on bill. So the way that works is that essentially your electric bill goes down. You don't have to provide payment information or anything like that to the solar company. You basically just say, sign me up, and then the savings start to flow.
Excellent. Noah, I appreciate your time, and thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you, Barry. Nice talking to you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Plugging In. I hope you learned something, and I hope you share this knowledge with someone else. It would be incredibly helpful if you leave us a 5-star review wherever you found this podcast. If there's a topic you would like us to cover in the future, or have a question about clean energy, send us an email at podcast@aceny.org. You can follow us on social media using the links in the show notes, or consider joining our Clean Energy Supporters mailing list at aceny.org/support. Your support is crucial to creating a brighter and healthier New York. I'll see you next time.
As the sun crests on the horizon, a new day dawns in our state. A new hope for tomorrow is rising, a clean future we create. Tomorrow we breathe easier, tomorrow the skies are clear. Today we are plugging in the future